A good horror mechanic you've seen repeated through the years are security cameras, inspired from the original Five Nights at Freddy's. They've been done plenty of ways since then, and while of course it is integral that you come up with something unique for your own game, I'm still gonna, just for fun, show you how this is achieved. And luckily, it's also relatively simple and done in a pretty similar way as the Resident Evil one we did. So let's go into Blueprints, Actors, and I'm gonna make a new folder called Security Cameras. And we need two actors, and one of them is going to be the camera, and we can put as many security cameras as we want throughout our map. And the other will be the camera controller, which, for example, in Five Nights at Freddy's is that laptop/computer you have in front of you that you can interact with. So let's make the controller first. So right-click, Blueprint Class, Actor. We're going to call it BP Camera Controller. And make another actor, BP security camera. So let's actually make the security camera first. It might be easier. So let's add a camera to our actor, and let's mess with the camera's post-processing. Since we're actually using a separate camera this time, we don't have to do the same technique we did for the handheld camera. Since this is the same camera that we use, we don't switch cameras. We had to find this workaround, but since this is a completely separate camera, we can actually go into its post-process settings down here and mess with these. So since we've gone over it twice now, we can just go over this quicker and just switch it up. So I'm going to get into lens, exposure, and the min brightness and max brightness. I'm going to be 0.8 and 0.8, just so it's slightly lighter than our default. And then in image effects, I'm going to turn the vignette up to 0.6, and the grain, jitter, and intensity I'm going to also put at 0.6 for both of them. And then in color grading, global saturation, I'm gonna change the saturation to 0, so it is completely black and white. Even though in this level you wouldn't be able to tell too much of a difference because most of these assets are pretty grayscale anyway. But I guess for reference we can throw a cone in and try to find some colorful material like that. So okay, yeah, so we'll be able to take a look to make sure that works. And that's all we'll do for the security camera right now. We can just put two cameras into the world at the moment, so maybe something like this, a bit higher, and then rotate it down just slightly. And you can already see that this red cone has turned black and white on the preview right here, so we know that that post-processing is working, which is great. All right, and let's add maybe a camera for the stairs. Maybe put one up here. I don't know, you just kind of get to have fun with this part. And then maybe we'll have one in the room that we can't reach over here. Like that. Okay, yeah, these look good. I'm gonna add one more just for this room in total. Okay, now I'm done, I promise. So let's make this camera controller. So we're just going to add a box right now, or a cube, I should say. And you can replace this with any kind of like a computer monitor or anything like that. Just gonna pull it out into the world to make sure I got the sizing right. I guess that's fine. Maybe a bit bigger. Like, well, yeah. All right, that's good. And this is just what we will interact with to get into the security cameras. And in order to interact with it, if you remember, we need to implement our interface. So go to class settings, implemented interfaces, add BPI interaction right here. And now when we press, if we implement this function and we press E on it, then this will be called. We can test this by printing a string, just saying go into security cameras. I know I spelled security, I will not be fixing it. So now if we hit E on it, go into security cameras, great. Okay, so let's delete that. And we need to create a bool called is viewing cameras. And we'll just create an if statement off this interact right here. And if we are not viewing cameras, then we want to go in. So we will set is viewing cameras to true. Then we will get the player controller. And we will disable input. This goes into the player controller, not the target. The target will be our player character. So once we are in the cameras, none of our input will work. So we can't like open the inventory and do all that. None of the buttons will work that are set in our character. Get player controller. We want to set ignore look input so that and make that true. So you cannot look around while viewing the cameras. I also want to get rid of the HUD, so we will have to get player character, cast to L1 character. We can right click and make that pure because we don't need the execution. And then we will get the main HUD ref and set the visibility to hidden. Now we want to enable input for this actor right here. So it just pays attention to this actor's input. So we will get the player controller and enable input. This will come to the player controller and the target will be self. Now let's make a custom event for undoing all of this once we leave. Call it leave camera controller. We will set is viewing cameras to false. We will disable the input for this actor here. So get player controller, disable input, target self. We want to reset ignore look input, so we will once again be able to look around. We will grab all this and set the visibility of our main HUD back to non-hit testable self only. And then lastly, we will enable input for our player character. So get player character and enable input as that target. Just to be safe, we can call this custom event from the true here. And just leave it like that. Now let's create an input. So let's just do input spacebar. And let's just print a string for now. And we will say pressed spacebar. All right, so let's test this out. So when we hit play, everything's normal. Nothing happens when we jump or press the spacebar other than we jump. But when we interact with our camera controller, we can no longer move around. The main HUD disappears, and now when we hit spacebar, it switches over to our print string. Press spacebar. So what we want to do is when we hit spacebar, we want to cycle through our cameras, but we don't, this actor BB camera controller isn't aware of all of the cameras, the security cameras that exist in this world. So what we have to do is create a begin play, and we are going to get all actors of class, and the actors we're going to select is our security cameras. Now, out of the out actors, we want to promote this to a variable, and we're going to call this security cameras. So in the begin play, we don't have to create our own array and then add them in manually. It'll automatically detect every security camera in the level, which is great. So let's add a function called view through camera, and we need to create a variable called current camera index, and this will be an integer. So this will be the number of the camera we're on. I think we have 4 cameras in the world, so it'll be a number 0 through 3. And this will kind of keep track of which camera we're on, so we know which how to get to the next one. So we will get player character and set view target. Sorry, not get player character. We will get player controller and set view target with blend. And the player controller is the target, and the new view target is going to be the security camera at our current camera index. So we'll get a security camera, we will get a copy, and the index we want is the current camera index, which defaults at 0, and we will put that into the new view target. I'm also just now realizing that when we were working on Resident Evil, I said that I would explain, or I would showcase the blend time, and I just realized I forgot to do that, so I'll do it in this episode right here, just in a minute. After we set the view target, let's add a return node, because that's all we have to do at the moment. So now in the event graph, when we interact with our controller, at the end of all this, I want to call view through camera. So we will view through the first camera in the scene, which I believe is this one right here that looks at the cone. So now when we interact, it switches to the camera. It's in black and white, and we still have our movement and HUD disabled, which is great. And now I'll showcase the blend time, camera controller, by going to view through camera. So blend time 0, I think makes more sense for this type of thing, but if you want to see, if I put a blend time to 1 second, it'll blend between the current view and the new view, which is that camera up there. So if I hit E, it moves like this. Now the post-processing will still snap from one to the other, but it is still a pretty cool effect. But I'm going to change that back to 0. Now we want to be able to cycle through the cameras, because it only ever shows us through the first one. So we're going to use the spacebar for that. So get rid of the print string, get the current camera index, and we want to set the camera index to that +1. And then after we add 1, we will just call view through camera again, which takes the input right here. So it should switch to the next one. We can test that out. So let's hit E. We look through the camera with the index of 0. We hit spacebar, it adds 1. We're looking through the camera with the index of 1. We hit spacebar, it adds 1. We're looking at the next one. Hit spacebar, we're looking at the next one. If we hit spacebar again, we have an error because there is no camera under that index. So it just gave us whatever that weird view was right there. So we need to cycle it back to 0 once we get to the maximum. So we will do this with a select node. So if this number, if the current camera index +1 is greater than the amount of security cameras, we want to reset it to 0. So we get the security cameras, and then we get the length, which is the amount, and we want to subtract 1 from this number, because the length starts at 1 when the index starts at 0. So if we want them to match up, we have to subtract 1 first. So if this amount is greater, then we want to set the index back to 0. But if it's not, we want to get the current camera index plus 1. So now, when we hit play, interact, I press spacebar, we go to number 1, because the first one is number 0. Number 2, number 3, hit spacebar again, we go back to number 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. And we can cycle through them forever. Alright, so now we want to obviously be able to get back to our player once we're done with that. So in camera controller, at the end of leave camera controller, we have to get the player controller, set view target with blend. The new view target is our player character. Blend time is 0. And we just need to create a button to actually leave. So I'll use input return, which I believe is the escape button and the backspace button. And then I'm also going to use input action, which is our E key. So we press E to get in, we press E to get out. So I'll use both of these to call, what's it called? Leave camera controller. Alright, so now if we hit play, we go in and we hit E, we are back and everything is back to normal. We go in, we hit backspace, everything works. We can't hit escape because that'll just close our game, which is why I created backspace to also work with it. It should also work no matter what camera we're in. Yep. Alright, so that all works. And that is essentially the core of how it works. You can do all types of things, such as maybe going into the security cameras and say you want them to kind of, rotate a bit. You could easily do that with a timeline in the begin play, just like that, and just create. We've created so many timelines, you should be able to figure that one out for yourself. Just, have it affect the rotation of the camera on the z-axis. Other things is you could always have it reset to 0 when you go back in. For example, if we switch to number 3 here and go out and then go back in, it's still on number 3, but you could always have it set back to 0 by going into the camera controller, and then on the leave camera controller, right before you set the view target with blend, you would just have to set the current camera index back to 0, so it just resets every time you leave. It would be as simple as that. So we hit E. We come out, we hit E again. It seems like somehow the one up here got reset to the 0 itself, which is fine. But you can see that if this is the default one and we switch to the stairs one, we leave and we come back in, it goes back to the default one. Alright, so that's going to be it for this episode. I will see you in the next one.